Right now, lift your eyes from the nearest screen, wall, or object, and find the most distant horizontal line available to you. The edge of a roof, the far end of a street, the place where land appears to meet sky. Do not stare at one point. Let the entire line enter your vision at once. Within a fraction of a second, millions of photoreceptors alter their electrical output. 6 extraocular muscles change torque. The lenses inside your eyes reduce optical power, and the balance system buried inside your skull receives a stable external reference for gravity. You have not merely looked farther away. You have changed the operating geometry of your nervous system. The horizon is not a special object. It produces no chemical signal. It does not transmit calmness through the air. It is simply a large, distant, approximately horizontal boundary, but to a brain responsible for keeping a moving body upright, that boundary is unusually useful data. Your brain never directly measures the world. It receives voltage changes, light crosses the cornea, passes through the pupil, bends through the lens, and lands upside down on a curved sheet of neural tissue approximately 0.5 millimeters thick. That sheet is the retina. It contains roughly 120 million rods and 6 million cones, but these cells do not send a photograph to the brain. They convert photons into changes in membrane current through a molecular chain involving opsins, transducin, phosphodiesterase, cyclic guanosine monophosphate, and ion channels. In darkness, cyclic guanosine monophosphate keeps sodium and calcium channels open. The photoreceptor remains relatively depolarized. When light activates an opsin molecule, transducin activates phosphodiesterase, cyclic guanosine monophosphate concentration falls, the channels close, and the cell hyperpolarizes. Light turns the current down. The signal then passes through bipolar cells, amacrine cells, and retinal ganglion cells. The axons of approximately 1 million ganglion cells are bundled into each optic nerve. Those axons carry not an image, but compressed information about edges, contrast, movement, color, direction, and change. A horizon generates a particularly clean edge, bright above, darker below, a long boundary extending across much of the visual field. Its geometry is simple enough to be detected by populations of orientation-sensitive neurons, but large enough to provide information about the position of your head and body relative to the environment. This is the first mechanism. The horizon is a reference line. Inside your skull, your vestibular system is attempting to solve a problem that has no single sensor. It must determine whether your head is rotating, whether your body is translating, whether gravity has shifted relative to your skull, or whether the external world itself is moving. 3 semicircular canals in each inner ear detect angular acceleration. They are arranged in roughly perpendicular planes and filled with endolymph. When your head rotates, inertia causes this fluid to lag behind the canal wall. The fluid bends a gelatinous structure called the cupula, deflecting hair cell stereocilia and changing the firing rate of the vestibular nerve. The otolith organs measure a different variable. The utricle and saccule contain calcium carbonate crystals called otoconia, resting on a gelatinous membrane. When your head tilts or accelerates in a straight line, the mass of these crystals produces shear force across the hair cells. This is an inertial measurement unit made of living tissue, but it contains an engineering ambiguity. Gravity and linear acceleration can produce similar forces at the sensor. An accelerometer in a sealed box cannot always determine whether the box is tilting or accelerating unless it receives information from another channel. Your brain faces the same calculation. Vision supplies part of the correction. When the horizon remains stable, it provides evidence that the external frame is not rotating. When the visual world tilts while the vestibular organs report no matching movement, the nervous system must decide which sensor is wrong. When the signals disagree strongly enough, the result can be dizziness, disorientation, nausea, postural instability, or motion sickness. This conflict is measurable. Experiments using large moving visual displays have repeatedly shown that optic flow can drive body sway even when the floor beneath the participant remains stationary. The visual scene moves. The nervous system interprets part of that movement as self-motion. The ankles, hips, trunk, and neck produce corrective torque against a displacement that never physically occurred. Peripheral optic flow alone can be sufficient to alter posture. The body obeys the visual field. A stable horizon performs the opposite function. It does not generate a false motion command. It supplies a low-noise external coordinate that can be compared with the semicircular canals, otolith organs, pressure sensors in the feet, joint receptors in the neck, and muscle spindles throughout the body. The nervous system calls this sensory integration. An engineer would call it sensor fusion. No sensor is trusted equally at all times. The brain dynamically adjusts the weight assigned to each input. On firm ground, in daylight, visual, vestibular, and somatosensory data can be combined. In darkness, visual weighting drops toward zero. On an unstable surface, pressure and ankle feedback become less reliable, so the system may increase its reliance on vision and the vestibular organs. A distant horizontal reference is useful because small movements of your own eyes and head produce less apparent displacement in a distant object than in a nearby one. Hold one finger 20 centimeters from your face and move your head a few centimeters sideways. The finger appears to sweep across the background. Perform the same movement while observing a ridge several kilometers away. The ridge barely changes position. The difference is parallax. Nearby objects produce large angular shifts on the retina when your head moves. Distant objects produce smaller shifts. A far horizon therefore behaves like a mechanically stable reference even though neither you nor the atmosphere is perfectly still. Lower apparent movement, lower correction demand. This does not mean the brain becomes inactive. It means one part of the control problem becomes easier to solve. Now consider what happens when your gaze remains trapped at short range. A smartphone held 30 centimeters from your eyes requires approximately 3.3 diopters of accommodation in a person whose refractive system is otherwise focused for optical infinity. A target at 50 centimeters requires about 2 diopters. A distant horizon requires accommodation close to zero. A diopter is the reciprocal of focal distance in meters. 1 meter equals 1 diopter, half a meter equals 2. A third of a meter equals approximately 3. To focus near, the ciliary muscle contracts. Tension on the zonular fibers falls. The elastic lens becomes more convex and increases its refractive power. At the same time, the eyes converge. The medial rectus muscles rotate both eyes inward, so the image of the near object falls on corresponding regions of the two retinas. The pupils may constrict as part of the near response triad: accommodation, convergence, constriction. 3 linked actuators. The parasympathetic pathway controlling much of this response begins in the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, travels through the oculomotor nerve, synapses in the ciliary ganglion, and reaches the ciliary muscle and iris sphincter through the short ciliary nerves. Acetylcholine binds primarily to muscarinic receptors. Intracelia signaling alters smooth muscle contraction, changing lens geometry and pupil diameter. Looking into the distance releases much of the accommodative demand and reduces convergence. The optical system shifts from continuous near-field correction toward a more neutral configuration. That mechanical release can feel like relief. But precision matters here. Reduced accommodative effort is not the same thing as direct whole-body parasympathetic activation. The eyes contain autonomic circuitry, but changing lens focus does not automatically prove that the vagus nerve has slowed the heart, lowered blood pressure, or deactivated the amygdala. Those are different pathways. The common claim that panoramic vision instantly switches the entire body from sympathetic to parasympathetic mode is stronger than the evidence. The anatomy permits interaction. The direct causal measurement remains limited. What can be stated with greater confidence is that near visual work demands sustained accommodation, convergence, attention, and repeated small eye movements. Moving the gaze toward optical infinity changes all 4 variables at once. The eye motors reduce near torque. The lens reduces optical power. The image becomes less dominated by high-speed parallax. The attentional field can expand. This brings us to the second mechanism. The horizon changes the distribution of visual attention. The central few degrees of your vision contain the fovea, the retinal region with the highest cone density and greatest spatial resolution. It is the inspection tool. You aim it at letters, faces, tools, screens, wounds, food, and anything requiring precise identification. Foveal vision is narrow. High resolution is expensive. Peripheral vision has lower spatial detail, but covers a much larger angular area. It is highly effective at detecting movement, broad spatial layout, changes in direction, and approaching objects. It feeds systems involved in navigation, posture, orienting, and rapid defensive responses. When you stare at a small nearby target, visual processing is concentrated. The brain repeatedly selects a tiny region, suppresses competing input, generates saccades, corrects fixation errors, and predicts what should appear after each eye movement. A saccade can reach several hundred degrees per second. During it, visual sensitivity is partially reduced, so the world does not appear to smear. The brain then compares the arriving image with its prediction. This cycle repeats approximately 3 or 4 times per second during many forms of active viewing: fix, jump, suppress, reconstruct. A distant horizon invites a different geometry. Instead of extracting fine detail from one object, you can distribute attention across a wider area. The eyes may still move, but the operating purpose changes from microscopic inspection to large-scale orientation. The difference is not mystical. It resembles switching a radar system from narrow-beam tracking to broad-area surveillance. Narrow tracking produces high detail about one target. Wide surveillance produces lower detail across a larger field. Both are necessary. Remaining locked in either mode indefinitely would be inefficient. Threat can narrow the system. Under acute arousal, attention becomes biased toward information that appears immediately relevant. Pupils can dilate. Heart rate and skin conductance can change. Visual processing prioritizes potential threat, and defensive circuits become more responsive to motion that resembles approach or collision. Human experiments using expanding looming stimuli show that visually approaching threats can produce coordinated perceptual, physiological, and neural responses. Expansion matters because an approaching object generates a specific optical pattern. Its image grows across the retina. The expansion rate contains information about time to contact. Your brain does not need a ruler to know that something is closing distance. It can estimate collision from the changing angular size. This calculation is ancient. Looming sensitive circuits have been identified across species, from insects to mammals. In humans, rapid visual threat processing involves cortical and subcortical networks, including the superior colliculus, pulvinar, amygdala, and connected motor structures. The exact routing remains debated, but the functional result is clear. Approaching visual expansion receives priority because delay carries mechanical cost. A stable horizon is not looming. It occupies a large field but does not rapidly expand. It provides spatial scale without an imminent collision signal. It can carry movement, clouds, waves, vehicles, trees, but the fundamental boundary remains distant and slow. The visual system is receiving information, but not the geometry of impact. That distinction may explain part of the subjective reduction in tension people report when looking outward across open space. The visual field contains broad environmental structure without forcing continuous near-target tracking or generating a strong approach signature, plausible, not proven as a universal calming switch. And here is where the story changes. The brain is not only estimating external motion, it is estimating your own motion. Every time you walk, optic flow moves across the retina. Objects near you sweep backward rapidly. Distant objects move slowly. The focus of expansion, the point from which the visual scene appears to radiate, provides information about heading direction. Your visual system can use this flow to estimate where the body is going before the feet arrive there. Regions including the medial superior temporal area, often called MST, respond to complex patterns such as expansion, contraction, rotation, and translation. Other regions, including the ventral intraparietal area and parts of the posterior parietal cortex, combine visual motion with vestibular and body position signals. The system is not creating a movie. It is solving vectors, direction, velocity, rotation, time to contact. A clear horizon improves the geometry of this computation because it separates vertical structure from the gravitational frame. The sky occupies one region, the ground occupies another. The boundary supplies information about head tilt and environmental orientation. When the horizon tilts, the brain must determine whether your head tilted, the terrain tilted, or the visual reference itself is unreliable. Pilots, sailors, and drivers understand the consequence when this computation fails. In aviation, a visible natural horizon is one of the strongest orientation references available. Remove it in cloud, darkness, fog, or featureless terrain, and the vestibular system can generate convincing but false estimates. A gradual bank may fall below the detection threshold of the semicircular canals. When the pilot corrects the aircraft, the fluid dynamics inside the canals can create the sensation of banking in the opposite direction. The instrument says level. The body says tilted. The body can be wrong. This is why artificial horizon instruments are built as explicit visual substitutes. They display aircraft orientation relative to gravity because the biological inertial sensors cannot be trusted under every motion profile. The horizon calms nothing by intention. It reduces uncertainty in a control loop. Uncertainty is expensive. Whenever sensory channels disagree, the brain must allocate processing power to resolve the conflict. Visual motion without vestibular motion can increase postural sway and provoke autonomic responses. In experiments with moving visual scenes, participants can develop nausea, sweating, dizziness, stomach awareness, and changes in physiological activity even though the body itself is stationary. Direction of visual flow can alter both symptoms and autonomic measurements. The autonomic response is not caused by sight alone. It emerges from prediction error. One sensor reports movement, another reports stillness. The system cannot immediately reconcile the two. This is similar to two feedback sensors on an industrial machine reporting incompatible shaft positions. The controller increases correction effort because at least one channel must be wrong. If the conflict persists, oscillation and instability can follow. A stable distant reference reduces one common source of mismatch. Visual data agree more easily with the vestibular estimate of stillness. The postural controller can lower the amplitude of unnecessary corrections, not zero corrections, smaller corrections. This may be one reason people naturally search for a fixed point when dizzy. Sailors look toward the horizon. Dancers spot a distant target during rotation. Passengers prone to motion sickness are often advised to look outside rather than downward at a book. The principle is sensor agreement. Looking down at a fixed object inside a moving vehicle tells the eyes that the immediate scene is stationary, while the vestibular system detects acceleration, turning, vibration, and tilt. Looking outside allows visual flow to correspond more closely with the vehicle's motion. The conflict decreases. The horizon becomes a calibration rail, but there is a third mechanism operating at the same time. The position of your head changes. Near work usually pulls the gaze downward. The upper cervical spine flexes. The head translates forward. The shoulders may rotate inward. The thoracic spine may increase flexion. None of these positions is inherently dangerous. The body is designed to bend. The cost appears when one configuration is held without variation. An adult head has a mass near 4 to 6 kilograms. When its center of mass moves forward relative to the cervical joints, the gravitational moment arm increases. Neck extensor muscles must produce greater counter-torque to prevent the head from continuing downward. Torque equals force multiplied by perpendicular distance. The mass has not changed. The lever arm has looking toward a distant horizon, often raises the head and places the visual axis closer to horizontal. This can reduce the forward moment, alter cervical muscle recruitment, and expand the rib cage from the compressed geometry of a downward posture. Breathing may then change indirectly. The diaphragm remains the main respiratory pump, but rib position, abdominal pressure, spinal configuration, and accessory muscle tension influence the resistance against which it operates. When the head lifts and the chest is no longer folded tightly over the abdomen, some people naturally allow a larger tidal volume. A deeper breath can affect autonomic output through pathways that are far better established than the horizon itself. During inhalation, vagal influence on the sinoatrial node decreases, and heart rate tends to rise. During exhalation, vagal influence increases, and heart rate tends to fall. This oscillation is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. Slow breathing near approximately 5 to 6 breaths per minute can amplify heart rate variability in many individuals by bringing respiratory rhythms closer to the resonance frequency of the cardiovascular baroreflex. The baroreflex is a pressure control loop. Stretch receptors in the carotid sinus and aortic arch detect changes in arterial pressure. Their signals travel through the glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves toward the nucleus tractus solitarius in the brainstem. The brainstem adjusts sympathetic and parasympathetic output to the heart and blood vessels. Pressure rises. The controller reduces drive. Pressure falls. The controller increases it. Looking at a horizon does not directly activate this circuit in the way a drug binds a receptor. But if the act causes you to release a compressed posture, stop reading, reduce visual search, and breathe more slowly, the downstream physiology can become real. The mediator matters. The horizon may be the trigger for a behavioral state change rather than a biological treatment by itself. This is the layer often removed from popular explanations. A person steps outside, lifts the head, sees a distant landscape, receives brighter light, stops reading notifications, changes breathing, walks, encounters lower noise, and directs attention away from an immediate problem. Then every physiological change is attributed to panoramic vision. That conclusion cannot be isolated from the package. Light affects circadian systems. Movement affects circulation. Nature exposure changes sound, temperature, odor, and attention. Social context changes threat perception. Expectation changes experience. Breathing alters cardiac dynamics. Posture alters muscle load. Distance alters accommodation. One action. Multiple control loops. The correct scientific question is not whether the horizon contains a calming force. It is which variables change when the eyes move from a narrow near target to a broad distant field, and which of those variables can be independently measured. Some can. Accommodation can be measured in diopters. Convergence can be measured in meter angles or prism diopters. Pupil diameter can be measured in millimeters. Eye movements can be measured in degrees per second. Postural sway can be measured through center of pressure displacement in millimeters. Heart rate variability can be calculated from electrocardiographic RR intervals. Skin conductance can be measured in microsiemens. Vestibular function can be tested with rotational chairs, caloric stimulation, vestibular-evoked myogenic potentials, and video head impulse testing. A vague sensation becomes a set of signals. The strongest evidence supports the role of vision in balance, self-motion perception, postural control, and sensory conflict. The optical mechanics of looking far away are also established. The role of broad visual attention in arousal is anatomically plausible and consistent with threat processing research, but the claim that viewing a horizon directly and reliably switches the entire nervous system into a calm state has not been demonstrated as a single universal mechanism. That distinction does not make the experience false. It makes the mechanism more precise. Consider the pupil. It is frequently described as a direct window into sympathetic activity. The reality is more complicated. The sympathetic system contributes to dilation through the iris dilator muscle. Parasympathetic fibers traveling with the oculomotor nerve constrict the pupil through the iris sphincter. But pupil size also responds to luminance, cognitive effort, surprise, uncertainty, emotional arousal, drugs, age, and the near response. The same diameter can be produced by different control inputs. This is another sensor fusion problem. When a person looks from a bright phone to a darker distant landscape, the pupil may enlarge because luminance fell, even if mental tension also fell. When the person looks toward a bright sky, the pupil may constrict because photon flux increased, not because the parasympathetic nervous system placed the whole body into recovery mode. Pupil diameter is evidence, not a verdict. Heart rate variability has similar limitations. It contains useful information about cardiac autonomic modulation, particularly across controlled breathing conditions, but it is affected by respiratory rate, posture, age, activity, medication, temperature, measurement duration, and the mathematical metrics selected. One number cannot fully describe the state of the autonomic nervous system. The human machine does not have a single calmness gauge. It has interacting oscillators, neural firing, breathing, cardiac intervals, arterial pressure waves, eye movements, vestibular discharge, muscle spindle feedback, hormonal release, cortical prediction. Looking at a horizon changes several of those oscillators, but not always in the same direction, and not in every person. Someone standing at the edge of a cliff may see a vast horizon, while sympathetic output rises sharply. A sailor in a storm may stare at the horizon while fighting nausea. A person with agoraphobia may experience open visual space as threat rather than relief. Geometry is not destiny. Context sets the game. The nervous system estimates safety from combined evidence: visual motion, footing, memory, body state, social information, expected consequences, and prior experience. A horizon is one input among many. It can stabilize orientation while the situation remains dangerous. It can reduce visual effort while thoughts remain active. It can broaden attention while heart rate remains elevated. The brain is a predictive controller, not a reflex box. It constantly compares incoming signals with models of what should happen next. When prediction and input agree, little correction is required. When they diverge, error signals propagate through the network and update perception, posture, attention, or action. The horizon is valuable because it is often predictable. It stays distant. It changes slowly. It approximates level. It provides scale. It separates ground from sky. It helps estimate head angle and direction of travel. It does not demand fine reading. It does not usually rush toward the retina. Low-frequency spatial information, high-value calibration. For most of human movement, vision was not locked to a luminous rectangle 30 centimeters from the face. The eyes alternated continuously between near and far, hands, tools, faces, terrain, animals, weather, routes, obstacles, and the distant boundary of navigable space. The visual system was built for variation. The problem is not the screen as an object. The problem is prolonged operation in one range. Continuous near-focus loads accommodation and convergence. Continuous fixation constrains eye movement. Continuous downward gaze holds the head in one mechanical configuration. Continuous information intake sustains selection, suppression, and prediction. The system receives no reset pulse. Looking at the horizon supplies variation. It unloads near focus. It changes optic flow scale. It restores an external gravitational reference. It widens the available visual field. It may alter posture and breathing. It interrupts the stream of symbolic information. Letters disappear. Geometry remains. There is no established duration at which this becomes a medical intervention. 10 seconds has not been proven as a universal threshold. 2 minutes is not a molecular switch. 20 minutes is not guaranteed to lower cortisol because the eyes encountered a distant edge. But the mechanical changes begin immediately. Accommodation falls as the focal distance increases. Convergence decreases. Retinal parallax changes. Vestibular comparison receives a distant reference. Head orientation may rise. Peripheral visual input expands. Whether those changes produce measurable autonomic calming depends on the person, the environment, the breathing pattern, the previous state, and what else changes at the same moment. That is the evidence calibration. The optical mechanism is established. The balance mechanism is established. The sensory conflict mechanism is established. The postural connection is plausible and mechanically direct. The claim of a dedicated horizon to vagus calming pathway is not established. The physics still matters without the myth. Return your eyes to the most distant horizontal line available. Do not force relaxation. Do not manufacture a deep breath. Let the optical system do what it was built to do. The lenses flatten toward distance. The eyes reduce convergence. The nearby world stops sweeping rapidly across the retina. The vestibular system receives a stable reference. The postural controller compares gravity, pressure, muscle length, and visual orientation. The brain no longer has to extract meaning from every centimeter of the scene. For a moment, it only has to locate you inside space. The horizon does not tell your brain that everything is safe. It tells your brain where level is.